This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Hey, it's Christina.
Hey, it's Jen.
Hey, it's Kate.
Real Estate Misfit Moms.
So if you're anything like me, my husband and I talk two completely different financial languages. Like, he could say, I put $10 in the account, and all I hear is like, wah, 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 angry tone. Like, that's all I hear. So when we first moved here, Matt and I connected. I'm not even really remember how we connected, but we did. 6 Degrees of Matt. If you don't know Matt Boudreaux, you probably know somebody that does know Matt Boudreaux.
Because Matt knows everyone.
Everybody knows Matt.
Everybody knows Matt. We learned that really fast. But we met with Matt, and we set up some stuff as a family that you didn't really know that we needed. So, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, like, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Matthew Boudreaux. I am a financial advisor. That's pretty much what I do is help, individuals, families. You're talking about the couples aspect, small businesses. Just kind of be aware of what good financial decisions there are out there. Most people, the biggest gap, the biggest missing piece in their financial world is stuff that they don't know. So really, conversations is kind of like what you just described. Let's talk, try to be on the same page and figure out, hey, what's happening here? Where do we need to go? How do we need to get there?
Yeah, so I know that one of the things that we first did when we met was talk about things like how do we set up our future for our kids. Mm-hmm. So if you were to give us like top 3 things, you're a dad, so you've got kids, like top 3 things as a family, either starting out or mature, what are the top 3 things we should be looking at financially?
Yeah, so that's, great way to think through. I don't think the top 3 things are going to be the same for every person, every couple, every family. So I think it's more or less that mentality of, you're on a plane, put your air mask on for you first before you can think about anybody else. And so when you're thinking about kids planning, planning for kids, generations, whatever, just make sure that yourself or you as a couple or whatever is, that you're operating on a plane of, I know where I am, I know where I'm going. Let me make sure that is taken care of before I can think about the next tier of decisions. And typically, as a single parent, as a couple, there are things that definitely need to be in place before you start thinking about kids. Because if you're, not planning for yourself, but worried about the kids, you're not taking advantage of the time aspect, which, when we talk about investing, that's a huge piece. But if you're not setting yourself up for success, it's hard to think about your kids and getting them on the right place. Because you're sacrificing something if it's out of order.
It makes sense. Everybody would be on a completely, I guess that would work for anything because every family's different. Everybody's finances are different.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's goals are probably different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My goal is to survive.
That's a good goal.
That's my goal. I'm over here like, what are my financial goals?
It.
No, but it's just to pay my bills and survive, and that's about it.
Yep.
I have no long term at that point.
Well, and I think it's hard for someone like me and you, and now in Christina too, now that you're 1099, there is no being part of like a corporate world and having that 401k built in, and it's something that
That's normal.
That you just work with. It's totally fine. That you just work with, where it's like it just comes out of your paycheck. Now
Right.
it's like you have to think about retirement. You have to think about those things, and it's not all retirement plans work for 1099s.
Right.
There's tax benefits and there's all this other stuff that you have to think about, and it's totally overwhelming to me, like to even begin to think about things like that.
Like this morning, my husband got a new job, and so he's going back into the W-2 world, and he's like, so I'm thinking about like all this with my check, and I was like, putting my makeup on, like, He's like, what do you think? And I was like, huh? Were you talking to me? He was like, yes. And I was like, oh,
Sounds like
I didn't know what you wanted because I wasn't paying attention because you started talking about your checks and where you were going to allocate money, and I just don't know those things. Like, I'm lost.
Well, and I always thought,
That's how
I always thought that you have to put in the 401k. It's like you have to put in the 401k. That's what you're supposed to do. If the company will match up to 6%, then you should do that. Well, now looking back, and this is, I shouldn't say this out loud probably to you, but I have like 4 that are here and there and everywhere. And I'm like,
I have 0.
I really need to like
We need to talk.
wrangle those in. And like,
I have
That's
0.
like I have Tuesday next week
Right.
open.
That's right. That's right.
but that's just like nobody talks about those things.
Nobody teaches you.
No one
Right.
teaches you. It's just
No.
like you
I
walk
feel like
into
I'm a
corporate
child.
job and they just are like,
Yes.
oh look, you have this fancy
Right.
401k, and you're like, cool.
Okay, take 6% if you're gonna match it. Like, yay!
Right. Well, and that's the biggest problem, I think. I mean, kids aren't exposed to any kind of financial literacy or education.
Yeah.
And so those kids grow up into young adults, and they have even less of knowledge of what's happening around them, and you're thrown into this job structure, which, like you're saying, W-2, self-employed. There are so many things that apply to specifically the different situations that if you're not aware of, I mean, HR is not going to sit down and educate you on everything and how to do
No.
everything.
I didn't even
That's
know
a
how to fill out
liability
a
for them, so they
1099.
won't.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
But I didn't know how to fill out a 1099. When I became 1099, I was like, what do all these boxes
Yeah.
mean? Anybody? And my broker was like,
Yeah.
Can't tell you.
I mean, and that's why I exist. That's
Yeah.
why I do what I do.
That's
Those
good.
exact issues.
I'm going to call you. Well,
Do
no,
it, do
Jared's
it.
going to call you.
That's fine.
I'm
That's
not going to
fine.
call you.
I mean, whether it's self-employed, which do a lot of for you self-employed 1099
Yeah.
people, we offer that structure to you.
Right.
If you're W-2, we offer the advice on saying, hey, this structure is available to you. This is how you apply your information
Okay.
to that to get the
And you will work with us, like if I'm 1099 and they're W-2, like how it makes sense.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I got a business account now. Watch out.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Watch me go.
I mean, you laugh, but I'm like, I got money in 3 accounts. I can use whatever. I just got approved for a really good credit card. What?
I got this.
I'm 34 and an idiot. I'm like 18 again. Look at all this free money.
Yeah.
It's not free, Jen. You have to pay it back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or taxes on it, or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah,
it is. That's
exactly.
kinda,
But I'm like, look at all this free money.
Sorry, we had to pause because Thea was crying, which is what I was doing in my head was Matt was talking about money, but it's fine. So we'll continue on now.
he could internalize what you were feeling.
Yeah, he feels it, and
And
then
he
he
expresses
expresses it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me
that's-
too.
That's what happens. Yeah. So what are, like, we did our college fund. So you said
Yeah.
we should probably, like, if you're thinking about family, like,
Yep.
you need to do you first.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and I didn't do that. We did the college fund first. We thought kids first
Mhm.
because that's what we thought of.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
So if Will and I are now to take step 2, we have college fund. We did that. Go us. Probably need to think about Theo, but but like what would be our next step? Like what's the next thing that we should consider?
So, I mean, when you're thinking steps, and this is always like a conversation. When a new client comes, when a prospect comes, we start talking about all this kind of stuff. They're asking the hard questions, and I always say, let's take a step back and really figure out, okay, where is really square one? What is step 0? What do we need to think about before we start creating these steps? And I always say, and this is really 101. This may apply to some, this may not apply to some, but figure out where you are as a household. Know how much income you're bringing in. Know how much you're spending. And that usually leads to the bad, the B word, the budget word that everybody hates. And that's not really what,
I know.
we're not trying to create restrictions. We're trying to set up just information to where,
Jen's like, can you give me the word budget in a sentence, please?
My husband's like, budget. And I'm like, what's
Definition.
that?
So-
What's
so-
the definition?
Can we talk about that? Because budget? I'm just going to use a different bank account that you can't see.
exactly. You were saying earlier. So think of
not
it this
kidding.
way. Think of it a spending plan. And some people don't like that either. But think about, you want to be aware of how much you're bringing in and how much is going out.
Yeah,
if
none
you're-
coming in right now, a lot going out right now.
Exactly. So if you're
I'm
at a
here.
place where you're spending too much money that you don't have, then you can't really do a whole lot beyond
Credit
that.
cards, come on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I got that money.
well,
There's a lot of it. Look, I'm
but come up
borrowing
with a
it.
plan to pay
You're right.
those credit cards.
Okay.
At least down, not off, because a lot of people think they have to have something completely paid off before they start doing the next thing, and that's just not true.
It's unrealistic, right? In a
Right,
world where we
right.
live, like it's super unrealistic to be like 100% debt free because
Well,
everything.
especially in the place where you are with inflation, right?
Yes.
Well, especially with kids, because
yeah.
You never know.
no,
You
right.
constantly live in inflation when you have kids.
Yes.
Yep.
And then you have surprise, another one.
When the surprises that just one brings. So I mean, the knowledge I think is key, because if
Yeah.
you know where you've been, where you're going, at least that gives you kind of a direction on what to do next. I think the next thing, after understanding what's happening in your personal finance world, is setting up some sort of savings or emergency fund. A lot of people worried about making the biggest buck on investments when they don't have, $10 in their bank account. And I think that's another piece that has to get solidified, because there's something that makes you feel a little bit more secure when you have, cash in the bank in your savings or whatever. And I always say, depending on what kind of job you have, if it's more of a predictable W-2 salary type thing, you know how much money's coming next month. If you're self-employed, like all of us in this room are, you have to have a little bit more wiggle room, something that you can forgive yourself for when you spend more money one month.
I forgive myself all the time.
All the time.
When I do marketing stuff for my business, I'm like, that's a write-off. I forgive myself.
I use that line way more than I think I should. I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy that. Write off. This will look really good. Write off. I'm going to put that in a house
How much do you actually get back? Like, is there a percentage?
Do you
Because I
know?
know if you spend $100, you're not going to get $100 back.
No, it's not about getting anything back. It's about eliminating taxable income.
Yeah. Which also screws you if you want to buy a house, just so you know.
That's exactly right. It's a game.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's a game.
It's a total game. Not that there's not other ways to go about it.
Yeah, so
it's
you're
really
not
fun.
getting anything back for spending money. You're just removing it from your ledger of being
Taxable.
taxed on it.
Right.
That's really all that it is. And, of course, it has to be a legitimate
Of
expense.
course. And we get double taxed and
Right.
all the things,
Yep.
but because we're the employer and the
Ugh.
employee.
Yep.
I don't want to talk about taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
I'm
shift
very
away.
bitter
We can move
about
on to.
We'll shift away from
We
that.
can shift.
So bitter.
Yeah.
So
well,
when someone comes to you, like right now, in a state where no one knows what's going on with our economy, what's going on, Christina has talked a lot about the bond market, and they say, "Hey, Matt, I want to invest in stocks." What would you tell them as far as like what that looks like in the market that we're currently in?
Okay, as far as the market goes, if something's going down, something's going up, typically. So it's a matter of what's your goal for this money, and that's going to determine the timeline. If I need this money next year or in 5 years or 20 years, it's going to be a completely different outlook between what you're investing in. Because if you need this money for a down payment on a house in 3 years, we're not going to invest in the most risky thing because unless you're just, overflowing with cash and you can
Why not?
afford the
Not me.
risk. Absolutely. But you want to be more conservative because when you're on a smaller time crunch, a smaller timeline, you have less room for volatility. If you're thinking 20 years down the road, you have way more, again, we'll use the word forgiveness, volatility, because if it goes down, you've got time for it to come back up.
right.
But if it goes down and you need the money next week and it's like, I don't have time for this to come back up, then you have too much risk applied to that goal. So you want to eliminate that risk so that the line of the ups and downs are a little bit more settled to where they're not as bad. So
I've had clients terminate contracts because
Their stock. went
their
down.
stock went down because they were going to cash out to buy, and it was like an investor, and he's like, we're going to do, I'm like, okay, cool. And then he's like, I have to terminate. And I'm like, but why? And he's like, oh, it took a drop.
Yep.
We're down. I'm like, what? Like, are you, like, really that's what we're doing? Like, you didn't think, like, when you decided you wanted to buy that you were just going to cash out at that
Right.
point. You wanted to risk it for the biscuit that you lost.
You've used that phrase a lot recently.
I like that phrase. You don't risk it for biscuits? I didn't get this body by not eating biscuits.
Hey, body positivity, it's full figure fall, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm using that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
full figure. I've never used that.
I've never heard
Now
it.
you can.
That's
You're welcome.
fantastic.
I've heard that quite a few times out of you lately.
Well, my phrase is better than your phrase.
So, Jen, I think that's a common thing. And when we work with investors and they're trying to do those things and solve those things or make purchases, we create buckets for them. It's like, okay, if you need a down payment, when is that down payment? And we're going to create more of a short-term bucket for you so you're not susceptible to all the risk
Yeah.
that's affecting a purchase.
Okay, cool.
And it's a huge part of planning, and a lot of people want to do it on their own. And when you have a professional in your corner,
I was going to say, so like, my mom has a financial planner. She lives in Virginia, and they have a year-end review, but she also has like a semi-annual. So is it that when we start working with you, it's like a contract and we say, hey, we want to meet this many times, or I need you to call me then? Or is it just like you can see something that we need to like shift gears or shift money, and then you give that person a call and you're like, hey, Kate, this stock I'm anticipating it's going to drop. Let's move some money over to a different stock. Is that how it works as far as working with a financial planner? Or is it just like you only have this structure and you can't call them outside of that?
For me, and I can only speak for myself because I know there's a million different advisors out there, it depends on the relationship. Some clients just want to use you to open the account and we'll talk once a year. Clients who are the review, I mean, we have a conversation more than every quarter. We have a standing conversation every quarter, but because the market's been so crazy the past 2-3 years, it's way more frequent. Like I've got a client who we had their quarterly review 2 weeks ago, but something in the headlines draws a
Scared
question, and it's a question. It's more an education piece. Called and scheduled a conversation for this afternoon, and it's like, no, let's talk about this. I want you to be informed. It's not like we open the account, we'll see you next year. No, it's all about, this is what's going on, this is how it's affecting you, and this is what you should do. So yes, we're constantly reviewing, constantly talking through, and constantly recommending things.
And that's how I feel like I would personally need it, because I won't say I'm money stupid. Like I manage.
I am.
I'm not the big money. So Will and I split how we handle things. Like I do the budgeting, I do the day-to-day, I pay the bills, I know when the bills are due, I know what the bills are. Like if you ask me, I know exactly to the penny what it is. I typically know what our payoffs are on everything. But when it comes to like, I need a car, we need a college fund, we might need life insurance or whatever. Will keeps asking me about these things, and like for life insurance and like wills and all this other stuff, I'm like, yeah, I'm not your gal. I'm not your gal. Like, we have a guy.
Yeah.
That's
Matt.
the guy. Call Matt. Like, and you know, life gets crazy and he forgets. But like, you know, there are certain things that like I still haven't done that. Like, I haven't set up a retirement fund. We have Will's. I know.
I don't have one of those
Hi.
either.
We need to call Will.
We're gonna have a meeting after this meeting.
Okay. we need to call Will. Plug for my husband. But like, you know, there are things like I need to set that up. I mean, but I'm moving into like putting stuff in an S corp. So then I'm like, then I just feel like that complicates everything, and then I get really overwhelmed. So then I go into a like hole, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about it because I'm scared and I don't know what questions to ask because I don't know what I don't know. So therefore, I'm afraid I'm going to do the wrong thing.
Do you help advise like on S corps and LLCs and good, because I've got both of those and I don't know what to do with either one of those.
Yeah. Well,
I got a bill and it was like, you didn't do this, and I was like, nobody told me what to do. They just told me to get it, so I got it. Here it is.
I have a question. Like in my mind today,
He laughs at me silently. Like,
It's so funny.
He just
He laughs at
pitied
me all the
me. He
time.
was like,
I'm holding back my reaction
literally
to
just
you till the microphones are off.
Yeah.
No,
He's like
just
he's like
kidding.
sending
we
you
meet
his
after
cal-
this?
He's
Can I
like
buy you
sending
a
you his
coffee?
Calendly right now.
shame.
Right.
He's like, I'm gonna look up where you live and I'm coming to you because I just don't trust you to even make
that
it
has
the
to be
office.
hard. Is your instinct to be like, oh, come here, like sitting at a baseball game or
No, because a lot of people don't get serious about it until they realize that, okay, this is a seriously opportunity in my life. Because most people are clueless. And so they get to the point where like, I really need help in this. And that's good.
But then
until
it's
the
a hot
pain
mess?
is there. Well, no, until the pain
Oh.
of really, I can't force anybody's hand.
Right,
And I'm not
of course.
pushy with stuff like that. It's like when you feel the need for it, let's talk, because I can possibly suggest some solutions.
Yeah.
But you got to want it.
I'm just a dummy.
Yeah. Well, and also,
No
even
lie.
though you might want the organization and structure, I think in my mind, well, what does that mean though? Does that mean I can only have
No, that's not what. No.
$20 a week? You know what I mean? Like that's where my mind goes.
No, and when you're in, Kate says she's the one who pays the bills. When you have this stuff, the initial conversations, yes, let's plan it. But when it's set up, it's all about automation. And so if you're paying bills and you know what's happening, and you know what to expect, it's not difficult to maintain. It's more of a, no, I know this is coming. I know
yeah.
this is part of what I do, and it's just
And
out of sight, out of mind, almost.
I think for me, in my mind, the conversation is, say we all got it set up and it's like great. Then it's like we have what's happening right now. Like we had our heyday and I could have just like thrown dollars into whatever I wanted to throw it into. Because I was breathing and I had a real estate license, and that's how it worked last year. You could literally
Yeah.
just wake up and be like, I'm an agent, and you
Yes.
could make lots
I
of
made
money.
$5,000 today by just opening my eyeballs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but right now it's
Yeah.
hard, and
Yeah.
you're working, and there's so many agents that I really think don't know how to work right now. But then it's like your pay scale changes. Like we had a great pay scale last year. Our pay scale right now is like, meh. So my fear would then be the conversation like, hey, remember when I told you I was making all this dollars and now I'm not?
Yeah.
And that's to me because money feels private, and so
Yes.
it feels like
Yeah.
an intrusion. That's why Christina has issues sometimes. It's like it feels like an invasion of privacy. How do you make people feel comfortable having these money talks? Because it does feel a little scary to have someone knowing all your finances.
I think that's a very what the word is. You feel naked. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
showing all
Yeah.
the parts that aren't shown to most people.
Naked.
And so,
I'm
But
using
that's probably a much better word than vulnerable. Like,
yes.
yeah,
that's-
well, beyond vulnerable. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
and I think that's we got to get to know each other for you to feel comfortable with me before I can see what you don't want me to see, so that we can actually talk about it. And
Yeah.
I think the vulnerability is a huge beginning of any type of financial relationship. But I think once the understanding is there, then it's not as difficult. It's not as private. You don't feel as strange opening up those conversation pieces to say, hey, I did this, or I hate myself for doing this, or I love myself for doing this. It's all part of the same conversation, because you're talking about changing markets. One year's great, the next year's bad. Well, if you plan it and expect it, because it's going to go up and go down.
Yeah.
It's not as hard. It's not as difficult. It's not as unexpected.
Well, and I guess you would have a good tap on that too. So it's like you would anticipate that call from someone like Jen, me, or Christina. Like,
Every day.
hey, like I know the market's not great. I see it. Like,
Yeah.
let's meet. Like,
Yeah.
because for me, I'm not the person that needs all the accolades, but when it comes to something big financially, I always like feel like elated in myself. Like before Will and I moved here, we were completely debt free, and then we moved here and we got lots of debt because he didn't get paid to move. So then you incur debt moving.
Yeah.
So, but I felt so proud of that. So I feel like if I were to say these are my 3 goals and I met one, I would then want to celebrate that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that with your clients? How do you celebrate them?
You absolutely celebrate that. So, I mean, part of the whole conversation is, what are we trying to accomplish? But also, what are your goals? Like, what are your dreams? What's important way for you to reward yourself? And if it's something
Trip
expensive,
to Italy
yes,
for a month.
and if that's realistic, then that's realistic. But
Oh, it has to be realistic. Damn.
I want to go on an
Did you find a
all
billionaire?
Yeah, I want to. That's her side piece. I want to go on an all expense paid trip to the Bahamas and have everything be all inclusive. That's how I want to celebrate my meeting this goal.
so what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, if it's
I don't
guess
know. It
if it's
feels scary
realistic-
because I feel like all of the money talk is always like save money here, pay this bill,
Yes.
like increase this credit score,
But you're not-
and like
You're not
invest
living
here.
life if you're not celebrating
Right.
the rewards you're giving yourself. Like, my husband and I travel a lot. He beat cancer in remission, and we celebrated. Like, we went to New York. We'd already been there. We went back. It was fun. Like, but that's how, when we lived before I became an independent agent, I lived paycheck to paycheck, and
Right.
it was hard. I had a new baby. I had just moved here. Like, it was a lot. And now, maybe that's why I'm so frilly-nilly with my money, because I'm like, I have money now, when I didn't, and I was scared to pay
Yes.
my bills, and I'd look at them and I'd be like, I'll come back to you, boo, and like stuff it under something,
Right.
out of sight, out of mind. My bill's underneath some paper, so I don't see it. But we now reward ourselves for all of the things that we have accomplished, like fun things. Like when I had my best year, I bought myself a brand new car, all by myself.
Yeah.
That was so exciting when I went in and they were like, you can buy this all by yourself. I was like, I don't need my grandma, because my grandma had co-signed on my cars for years, because like I had an ex-husband and whatever, but like
Right.
I was like, I don't even need him with the good credit. I don't need him. No, you can do it. I was like elated when just my name was on. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So that was a reward to myself.
Yeah.
So do you build that into the program that
Absolutely.
you have with them? Like, okay, look, like it's going to cost you X amount of dollars. You can't just do all this and then have no money and just then we take 5 steps back.
Well,
Right.
I think that's one of the freeing parts about planning. If you come and you say, hey, I make $25,000 a year and I want to be a millionaire in 3 years, you might have to make a little bit more sacrifice than somebody making a.
Is that possible?
Right. I'm
no.
thinking.
Oh.
I was going to
lottery.
say.
I mean,
Yes.
I was like, I want that plan, Matt. How do I get on that one right now? Like, I want that one.
She's like texting Jared. She's like, meet
Matt
Matt.
has a plan. We need to meet Matt. He has a plan to be a millionaire in 3 years.
that would be.
Matt's
We'd have
phone
all
would be
kinds of
ringing
clients.
off
Right.
the hook.
Right, exactly.
Matt's like, I wouldn't be in this profession if that was available.
If there are realistic expectations and you know that you're on track to meet those expectations, then that frees you up in a whole new way, because you're not stressing, what do I have to sacrifice today? That's not what it's about. Planning is not about sacrificing and doing without. It's about moving forward, processing a certain way so that you can free yourself up later. Because it's all about, if we're talking about retirement planning, what lifestyle do you want in retirement? And what are you doing today to plan for that lifestyle?
Well, and some people don't want a retirement plan.
Right.
Like my grandfather worked till he was in his 80s.
Yep.
And like he would have totally got up and got to work every day if you would have let him, if he'd been allowed to. So it looks different for everybody.
Yep.
I can't imagine not working.
No,
Right.
I would be
right,
bored.
yeah,
Well,
I would
but
be
you
bored
do
too.
you can do what you do at a much older age than
Right.
say you're normally your
factory
roofer.
worker.
You know,
Right.
yeah. They don't want to
True.
get up on a roof at 85 years old, so they've got to plan a little bit differently.
Correct.
So that's what makes every situation unique.
So we talked a lot about like, you know, the older generation, or God forbid something happened in our lives, but like, so we're all married. Like, how does that work? Because we've had some interesting conversations where we spilled the tea on like people who had, you know, other wives that they didn't like disclose to new wives, and side
Oh.
pieces that they didn't tell anybody, and you know, all those
Listen
things.
to the podcast, you'll hear about it.
Okay, I will.
So it's
The
super
title
awesome.
one.
It's super
Yeah,
fun.
it was good.
But so what happens, so God forbid we lose one of our spouses. What happens if we're both connected to all of these things that we set up, like college fund and stocks, and what if the stocks are in Will's name and not my name, and like what happens to that?
So we're talking about estate planning here.
Yeah.
What happens if?
Yeah, what happens to all the money that we have in the
Yep.
ether
Okay.
for estate planning?
So again, you know, we talk about financial planning, and it really is particular to your individual situation. Estate planning is the same way, because it all comes down to, okay, Kate, we're planning for you. What do you want to happen to your stuff if the unmentionable should happen? And there's ways to plan that and not do anything and depend on the state to take care of that and go through probate and all this kind of stuff, or
Yuck.
setting up a will or a trust or there's things that basically allow you to declare your wishes, and then there's ways to also preserve some of it tax-wise by setting up whether it's a will or a trust. And again, part of the conversation with someone like me is talking through that. I mean, I'm not an attorney. I don't set those things up for people, but I can definitely advise and recommend, attorney or someone that would be able to set those documents up and put those things into play. That's absolutely part of the conversation of financial planning.
Okay, because it's definitely a fear, right? Like it's
Right.
scary to be like,
Everybody's going to die one day.
I mean, we're dying every day. Like you wake up, we're alive, but we're dying. Like it's a
Right.
weird conundrum, and God forbid something terrible happened. But, you know, if I've made these goals and set up certain things and something happened to me, I would want to make sure that my kids and my husband still have access, because I have been part of real estate deals where it's tied up for one reason or the other for a spouse that passed. Like all this money is sitting there tied up, and there's no way to tap into it. And so they go into this extreme financial distress because they have to pay for the funeral.
Yep.
Funerals are expensive. When my dad died, my mom and I were floored by coffin costs.
Yes.
And just, I
Insane.
mean, it's insane. And just, you know, you have to pay the church if you're going to have a church funeral, and then you have to pay the funeral grounds to have that service at the funeral grounds. And then you're paying all these people, and it's so raw in that moment. And if you're not financially set, you don't have everything you need. So, you know, it's definitely something that I feel like is hard for people to talk about, like life planning, money.
Yep.
The only thing that to me is easy to talk about is like, okay, I'm going to set my kids. Not that I don't love my husband, but it's like I need my kids to be financially set. I came out of college with debt. I don't want to have debt. I don't want my kids to have debt if I can avoid it. So how can I set my kids up so when they're out of college, they don't have a payment that they can't consolidate, that they can't pay off quickly, all of those things. And, you know, Christine and I just talked to a client yesterday who deferred her payment because
That's what everybody did.
Because everybody did, and she
Pretty much
had to.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she's a nurse, and she worked stupid hours during COVID, and she still works crazy hours. But, you know, all of these financial things that happen are scary to talk about. So as far as in a nutshell, how many products do you provide or help advise on for families or people, but families is really what we're worried about? How many products apply and work?
There's no number, but I would say we try to have access to anything and everything that would help someone.
A gajillion.
Whatever's out there. And because of what's happening in the market and the economy, things change all the time. So we've seen a lot of shift in the insurance world. And you know, talking about passing away and mean, typically you think long term. Hopefully, by the time you've lived a full life, you have assets built up. But you, in the meantime, while you're young and before you have your assets built up, insurance is going to play a huge part in taking care of such a huge loss. You're talking about coffin costs and funeral costs and facility costs. If you have life insurance set up and something happens now, you might be a ton in debt, but that insurance is going to pay out to cover those things. So your spouse doesn't have to worry about taking care of you and paying for those things. But in the long term, you may not need insurance at age 70 if you've got, $500,000 in the bank or in your investment account or whatever. So, I mean, it shifts. And at different phases of life, you need to focus on certain things and plan certain ways to cover the fears that, that are just unexpected. And so when you talk about different products, everything is so different per situation, per phase of life, per age, per category. If you have so many kids underage, if you have kids overage, I mean, everything can look very different. And so we try to, we're independent. We don't have locked into certain companies. If there's something that's going to help a client, whether it's a product or a system, we try to have access to that and use that as a tool when in need.
How are your, we're talking about money, so let's give the breakdown for the people. What is your, I know it's different for everyone, but your cost, is it you are paid hourly or per visit or per phone call, or are you an annual? How do, we retain your services, other than calling you?
So as far as the process goes, I mean, I don't charge to have a conversation. If you're trying to figure out if you need me, let's talk. I'm going to charge you for that.
Yeah.
If we figure out, okay, this is what we're looking at doing, if it's a product, if it's a process, if it's just advice, all of those three things look differently. You mentioned hourly.
Yeah.
We can charge hourly if that's all you want.
Yeah.
If there's a certain product you want, we need to figure out if that product's going to be determined by, if it's an insurance-based stuff, insurance companies typically will be a commission. So that comes out of whatever you end up being set up with. That's not something you're paying me.
Okay.
Advice or hourly, you would pay me.
Yeah.
If you're setting up some sort of investment account, it's going to be, you have 3 different options on how you want to pay for that. So it's definitely not a template.
Yeah.
Cutter. No, not at all.
So there's options available.
Oh yeah,
different
and that's
things
all
for
laid
different
out,
people.
and you choose. Here
Yeah.
are your options. You choose.
Okay. What about I'm a dummy and I'm I don't know. What do you think? Because that's literally, if we meet Matt and be like, hi, hey, what do I do?
Well,
That was the conversation Matt and I had. I was like,
Literally.
hi, I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm married. I'm 34 and I don't know what to do.
you don't have to. We'll talk. You don't have to worry about.
Do they bring in? Does somebody bring in all their bank statements and that's my mind goes to here's all my stuff.
Here's my file folder.
It can be that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're needing the whole tax side of things, yeah, we'll look at bank statements. But if you're needing, I just need a plan for retirement. I don't need to see a bank statement. I mean,
I think that's where, even in my job, people go, "Oh, you're so personal." You get into all the things.
you ask for more than what I would ask for.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I bet I ask for way
And
more.
that's crazy to me. I mean,
Yes.
it is and it isn't. But if I'm like Matt, I want to put $500,000 in a retirement account. You're not cool. Let me make sure you have that fluidity. You're just okay. Let me help you set up that account.
Here's the account. Make the deposit.
Because then you're responsible for putting the stuff into it, right?
So everything you just said, yes, but because of certain licenses I have, I'm not going to blindly.
Sure.
I have to ask the
Sure.
questions to make sure, because I'm a fiduciary, I have to ask certain questions.
Sure.
If you're want to invest $500,000, but you're only making $25,000 a year, that's probably not the best choice, and I need to tell you that. But so we're going to lift up the hood and look under the hood and make
little
sure that
bit,
everything
yeah.
looks.
Can I bring you a bag of money? Are you going to ask me where it came from?
I cannot take cash.
No mattress.
But if I
money.
bring you a
No
cashier's
mattress
check,
money. Well, you can't take mattress money either.
yeah, I know.
Right. Yeah. So
That's the thing.
Similar situation.
Similar,
there.
yeah. You
It
can't
has to be
just.
deposited into an account that you can pull from.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep. Or I can tell you who to write the check to, and you send it.
Yeah.
I do not handle money.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it either. I'd be like, no, $5.
So if somebody okay, we'll go back to me because I am the dummy in the room and I'm not ashamed of that anymore. If I wanted to read about it or learn about it prior to coming in, so I could make sure that I got a list of questions I probably won't ask, but I got them. What is there something you'd recommend that somebody could pick up to read or to gain more knowledge for dummies?
So, yes, there's so many sources out there. I would say again, I want to know what you're seeking for before I blindly send you somewhere. I mean, there are tons of books, there are tons of websites, there are tons of articles, there are tons of news headlines, and some of those are great, some of those are horrible.
Yeah.
And it just really depends on what you're trying to figure out.
Okay, so if I am just starting all of this and I want to make
Basic.
sure that I'm set up and that my kids are set up,
You need a retirement fund.
a retirement fund and a college fund. That's a lot of things, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I
So-
could read 4 different books.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
at least I
Or
know.
you can just set an
Christina,
appointment
those are
with
your
Matt.
books you can read?
Oh, yeah.
That's a side conversation.
She asked about book recs. I was like, you don't want mine.
Well, and I think it comes
I
down
walked
to
right into it.
philosophy. It's not a to-do list. Like I have to do number 1, number 2, and number 3. It's
Okay.
more or less, hey, here's the philosophy. Here's how you need to think about
That makes
money.
some sense.
Yeah.
And that's going to determine your steps, because in one of the disclosures I have to do, I'm like, things are we talking about? That's not personal advice for any individual. It's more or less, let's figure out where your mindset is, because that's going to be, I think, key for you to figure out what's most important to you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to blindly give you, do 1, and before you do number 2, you got to finish number 1.
Yeah.
That's not best case scenario. That's number 1. Your number 1's not going to be your number 1's not going to be your number 1, because,
And my number 1 really probably is number 4.
well, I don't know.
True.
I don't know.
Where would do you have maybe some authors or some books or some articles or people that you would say these are reliable sources?
Because there's a lot of unreliable.
Yes.
Fake news.
Well, and even some of the well-known names are not someone I would quickly suggest, just because some of those media personalities, they may be well thought of or well respected as a finance guru or expert, and
Yeah.
and I mean, you guys know how media is. There's a lot of clickbait stuff. There's a lot of thoughts thrown out there just to get attention or to
Right.
ruffle feathers, and like, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about because they get the attention. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So if
I know what
you're-
you mean, yeah.
Right. So
I got you.
Be careful not to point everyone towards specific source. I did think of a couple that are more, I think, like process philosophy based as opposed to 1, 2, and 3. And these are books that I've read, and I would say that it would be good if you have time to just dig into.
Yeah.
We talked about the lack of education for kids and students and things like that. And one of the book that I came across, I don't know, it's probably a little bit over a year ago. And this is for younger kids. This is probably for a great young elementary. Bring it into the classroom. Let's talk about how money works. The name of the book is The Squirrel Manifesto, and it's by Rick and Jean Edelman. And what the idea behind it is
Yeah,
like,
that's
all right, squirrels are out storing, they grow
Yeah, they store
nuts and they
all
store it
year
for
round.
later.
Yeah.
And it's so just like it's this illustrated, goofy, kiddie story that I guess just shows the point of they're out to hunt their food, don't eat
Right.
it all at one time, save a little bit for later.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that sort of thing, that's a fun, if you're trying to, read your kid a book and want to bring some money related thoughts.
Which
that's
is
one place
totally
to thought.
good because my kids think it grows on trees.
Yeah, right. Most kids do.
Like
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Well, you can just get some more.
Yeah.
Where? Where do you want me to get this?
Yeah.
Plant another tree in the back.
I guess. I was like, that tree's dead
Yeah,
back
yeah.
there, boo.
Suck the life out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, that's good to know.
For some more adult type stuff, and there's some good content, and I like these books because they're a little bit more principle driven as opposed to, again, step 1, 2, and 3. So there's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if you guys heard
Oh,
of
I've
Robert
heard of that,
Kiyosaki.
yeah.
He's got several books, and he's kind of, as he's gotten older, has some more extreme thoughts, and I'm not saying you should or should not believe them. I'm just saying this is a good book to think through
Start.
because it allows you to think about how do I think about money and how do I need to relate that to my kids or the next generation or even my young adult, because it's good thought
Yeah.
food.
Gotcha.
And then these are kind of considered classics that are just kind of been around for a little while, and they're kind of no-brainers when it comes to money and handling money, is The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and William Danko. Some people have heard of that, some people don't.
I don't know that I have.
Yeah, I've got it. It's good. It just kind of talks about, you're making money, your job is not to spend it. It's sometimes good not to live like if you're a millionaire, you're not living like you're a millionaire, you're kind of thinking through different jobs for your money, putting your money to work, and you benefit in the long run. And then the same author that we talked about, The Squirrel Manifesto, Rick Edelman, he has a book. It's called The Truth About Money, and this is a lot more technical. So if you're kind of wanting to nerd out on some of the individual product type stuff, it's a thick book. It's a little bit more high level, and it talks about these different types of accounts do these different things, and these apply to these people. That's kind of more along the lines that I try to talk to people and diagnose.
I know,
But-
I'm on the squirrel level.
I'm like,
Yeah.
My husband's on
is
that
the
level.
squirrel like a good one for dummy adults? 'Cause I'm in-
Probably you should start with that. See if you like it. and-
Christmas is coming. I'd like it
there
under
you go.
my tree. Okay.
That's
But-
good though, because
Yeah.
I like that the guy did the kitty one and then the
And then the
yes,
end result,
The
yeah.
nerd out
I love
one.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that
I like
helps.
it. Yeah.
So like my kids are a little bit younger than like your oldest. Well, not your oldest. Your oldest is an adult.
Right. Well, he thinks he
Um,
is.
But
age,
well, and that all kids.
that
I
age,
thought I was an
yep.
adult at
Yeah.
18 too. I was like, magic number. I'm an adult. Law says so. Mom
Got
pay
this.
Mom pay for all my stuff. But so say I feel like when I never got paid to do chores. Like we didn't have an allowance. Like that wasn't a thing in my family. My mom worked 3 jobs. My dad worked like sun up to sun down. Like it was
that's
like we were your normal like blue collar family, I would say. So and my parents sent us to private school. So like money was not like flowing openly in the family. So, but I remember when I got to high school and I got that summer job, the hard thing for me is my mom always she took 50% of my paycheck. And so how can we start setting, and when you work 2 days a week,
No, that's nothing.
like
right?
you think you're getting like $100, you're like, but I worked all these hours and you're taking all my money. But, you know, in my adult life, I'm like, oh, she's so smart. How can we start, like there's all these debit cards now that you see, like where it's like, you know, your kid can see their account, they can know how to get the money. How can we start creating, especially at like 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, who all they want is like technology now. And all they want is video games and tablets and computers, like the expensive things, phones. How can we, as moms and dads, train them up to have financial literacy outside of a book? Like what little things can we do as parents to try and teach them like budgeting and don't overspend and what an overdraft is and those types of things?
Well, I think, you know, everything that we've been talking about planning, the way I approach it with my kids is just that.
How old are your kids?
So I've got 4 kids.
Okay.
I've got a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Okay,
they're
and
all-
you've been doing this wealth management how long?
About 7-8 years.
Okay. I just wanted, like, so people could see the realm of,
Context.
like, the
Yes,
context of it.
Yes. So, and I can touch on some of the different years because I've got 2 that have been working since they, you know, the day they turned 16. So, with
Good for
with
them.
my younger,
They are
yeah,
good
yeah.
boys. They are such good
Yeah.
boys.
Hope that
I hope to
continues
raise
to
one
be the
mine
case.
that way.
They are good boys. Your
But-
girls are adorable, but they
Yeah.
I mean, they are well-adjusted gentlemen. I will say that.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. So, like, for London, my 12-year-old, so if she gets, I mean, we'll just use a similar example. You know, they start work and they have cash. They're handling cash. She does not have all the phone and the electronic and the Venmos and all that kind of stuff yet. So she gets a $10 bill. We're going to have a conversation. Okay, let's come up with a plan for this $10 bill. It's not, you know, we're not going to take you to the mall and you're going to spend it all on everything you see. Let's take, it's $10 and it's yours. But let's talk about long term. Let's save $1 of that.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Let's save $1 for savings, which is for you later. Let's put $1 into your long term, and I haven't done this. This is just an idea, and I'm thinking very long term, like one day, college, wedding, fun, vacation, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation. It's not, this is what I'm doing. This is, hey, let's talk about this. Let's make sure you're on board and you understand what the goals
Yeah.
of this stuff is. You know, 12-year-old, we're not going to talk about taxes. We'll talk about that when we talk about teenagers. But, you know, so they get $10. They know $1 is going here for way long term. I'm probably not going to touch that anytime soon. Another $1 is going to go in for kind of a big saving goal. And the $8 left, do what I want with it. That may not be the formula for everybody.
Right.
You know,
I
you
think
can
it's
weigh
fantastic.
that.
That's actually really
right.
smart. I
in a-
wouldn't have ever
My
thought
kid's
of
like,
that.
I want a bank account. I want to take my piggy bank, and can we go open a bank account? I'm like,
Yes, James
why?
is that way too.
She's
Uh-huh.
like, because I want to use my card, and I'm like, why? You've had that money in your bank account since you were a baby,
Right.
in your piggy bank since you were a baby. Like that's your birthday money. You just kept stuffing that in there.
Yeah.
Like she's like, there's $100 bill in there. Yeah, I
Don't
know.
spend it.
I put it in there.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so I think that that's a really good thing, and I literally think I might do that because I have one that I realized he owes me $75 because he bought a game on his phone and didn't tell anybody, and it was charging me weekly $10.81. Found that last night while scrolling through my
Yay.
receipts,
Oh, that's
and
always a
thought,
fun
Dad, you need
surprise.
to go find his phone. How did he get my card number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it out of there.
iPhone sharing. If you share a family, if you put your family in sharing, it automatically takes your purchase, the default card in there,
Okay.
and makes it so everyone can purchase on
Noted.
it.
Nice.
Check your accounts.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But I
So-
like this. So like, okay, cool.
So I
keep
mean,
going.
one of those dollars, if you want to set like, hey, one day you're going to be 16, you want your own car. If you save $1 of what you make, I'll match that dollar, and that can go into a savings account and
Yeah.
it'll go towards buying you a car later.
Yeah.
Things that motivate, things that
just hope we
educate,
have $1
things
at that point.
Right. How far will the $2 go? Who knows?
What?
Christina's like, he's gonna have $1 in there.
My kid's more like, what's the show like with DuckTales where the uncle goes and swims in his safe with
Oh,
money?
yeah.
Like that's James.
what
James
you're
is like
talking about.
he wants to like count his coins,
And
count
roll
his
around in it,
dollars,
and-
and like
yeah.
he wants to know and see it all the time. So when we've talked about like, you know, eventually we'll get you a bank account. You're not going to have a card, but you'll have a bank account.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it because he can't physically see it, and
Mm.
I'm like, but you're gonna need that, friend.
My
Like
kid's
he-
the opposite. She wants it not to see it.
James wants to roll around in it.
But
and
she
get-
wants to
and,
carry
look
it
at that
around in her little
dollar.
purse.
But if you like ask him for $1, he's like,
And
"But
lose
I
it.
made that dollar."
Yes.
And so teenager stuff, like when my oldest started working at age 16, and they fill out the stuff for the W-2, and
Yeah.
like try to explain, this is how companies take out, you got to pay taxes. And so I made sure that his withholding was where it needs to be so that he's not paying taxes at the end of the year, because if they make over so much money, they're going to be taxed on it.
Right.
But then we add a little bit extra withholding, and he doesn't miss it because it comes and it's deposited into his checking account, and that's his pay stub, and he can spend what he wants. Well, again, I said, okay, save 10% for later. And then what he didn't know at the time, and I don't know if we'll ever hear this, and I'll tell him one day, but he may find out with this podcast, but I upped his withholding so that he gets a tax refund at the end of the year, and then I put that into an IRA for him later.
Nice.
And
That's a
so
good parent
that's one
move.
way to squeeze a little bit more out to where they're not blowing all their money on.
And you're not paying for it
Right.
all.
Right.
Shoot.
And so that's kind of how I, same
See,
conversation.
that's why we need to call you.
Yeah, like when my kid is like, of the teenage years, I'm just gonna be like, okay, so I set up this meeting with Matt.
Yeah.
Matt's gonna
For
meet
sure.
with you and have you do financial planning with
Yes.
Matt because mom's just gonna get mad.
Well,
I just
and
know it.
we joke about the kids. You set up a structure and it works, and they don't know any different. It's the same thing for us adults. If we set something
True.
up to automate
that's
things
true.
and not have to live a certain way for a long time and then have to change something and
Yeah.
feel somewhat of a pain, if we just set up a structure now and don't know any different, you're going to be better off for it in the long term. Little steps here and there.
I did that one point, like where every paycheck, it was X dollars went to a different account.
X
well-
amount of percentage. Yes.
I was doing, I think I want to say it was like $400, $200. I don't know what it was,
I'm
but I
just-
forgot about it.
Right.
You just do.
Yep.
In real estate, you're supposed to like on your commission
40%.
30
Yeah.
to 40% for taxes,
Yep.
and I'm like, first couple checks, I was like, cool, I can do this, no problem. And then I had to like pay my taxes, and I was like, no. So now I'm just like, well, hopefully I have a big old closing right before taxes are due because
know.
well, there ain't nothing
That's what's
sitting
going to
over
pay your
there.
taxes. Yeah.
Because it's just like I need this money now.
Yeah.
But I think if I would have got into the habit of like taking it out and not touching it,
Yep.
I would have done better because like I said, this is totally off the wall, but growing up, my dad used to tell me that the gas tank, if it went below the 3/4, 1, 2, 3, the 3, that I was going to run out of gas. And that was like my time and once it
time
hit
to fill up.
empty, you were dead in the water,
Yeah.
not that you had more to go. So like I lived on that, like, oh, I got to get gas. And then I found out that that's not the truth. And so now I run around with like 5 miles
With
to empty
empty,
all
yeah,
the time
yeah.
because I'm like, my dad tricked me for a long time.
Yeah.
But it worked. And I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I think it was because he didn't ever want to come and save me off the side of the road because I ran out of gas.
Yeah.
And I was driving from town
Understood.
to town.
Well, that's a good way to do it. We're all in cyclical industries. Certain times a year, certain years are better than others, but certain times a year are definitely better than the bad times.
Right.
If you take care of those withholdings and
Yeah.
setting asides during the good times, you can give yourself a little bit more flexibility during the bad times.
Right.
But your stuff is already put aside, and you don't really have to dip into it unless absolutely necessary. But yeah, be proactive in doing that kind of stuff when the going is good.
So now that you're going to get 100 billion more clients off of this podcast, how do people get in touch with you? How
Okay.
do they find you?
I think I'm pretty easy to find
6
online.
Degrees of Matt
I mean,
Boudreaux.
just
Everybody knows
call
you.
these ladies if you need it. But I mean, I think the easiest to say is Instagram, Matt and Money.
Oh,
And
I like
with two
that
Ts,
handle.
Matt and Money. Find me on Instagram. Contact me that way. Obviously, call me, email me, whatever. Phone number is
Meet me if you wanna meet me.
254-732-0837. Call, text, whatever. But yeah.
You can also find Matt linked on our socials once his episode releases. So should you want to find out and reach out to him, you can reach out to him that way. We'll also list a link of the books that he has recommended, so you can see those as well.
Thanks for joining
Nice.
us today.
Awesome. Good to
Bye.
be with y'all.
Thank you. Bye. Hey guys, join us next week for part 2 where we continue to spill the tea with Title. This has been Real Estate Misfit Moms. Don't forget to follow us on socials at Real Estate Misfit Moms and bookmark our podcast so you never miss an episode. Remember, miss, you fit in here.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.